Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
I feel like I made a lot of mistakes, more than I feel like I usually do. It's just like you feel like you let you feel like you let your guys down.
An emotional Sebastian Castro, and you have to assume not the only Hawkeye with tears in their eyes after a 20-19 loss to Iowa State in the 2024 Cy-Hawk game. Welcome to this post-Iowa State edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here, breaking everything down. Thanks to everybody who's been tuning in from the get-go, from the very beginnings last year. Of course, if you're new to this, you can watch this live if you already are on the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel. We've also got an Eye on the Hawks playlist there full of the bonus content, extended interviews, clips that Owen and Mike are putting together throughout the week as well. And of course, if you're on Twitter, we are at Eye on the Hawks. You can also follow the Iowa's News Now Instagram channel for some of those clips as well. We are going to split today into kind of a what went wrong on Saturday and what's going right so far through two games. Iowa 1-1. We've talked about the stories of and tales of two halves. We've certainly seen that now in two iterations of the 2024 Hawkeye football season. First of all, let's just throw out instant reactions. We've had 48 hours about to digest everything. You guys' feelings after Saturday's Cy-Hawk loss?
In terms of what went wrong, we're going to get into this a little bit more, but I just thought of this morning because Bill Belichick was on the Pat McAfee show, and I was like, the red zone play calling inside the 5-yard line reminded me a lot of the Super Bowl when Pete Carroll decided to pass the ball. Instead of giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch. That just confounded me so much in the first half when they had the ball first and goal inside the 5, and they gave it to Kamari Moulton, and then they gave it to TJ Washington for the first time this year, I think. I'm like, what are you doing in that scenario where you don't just give the ball to one of your two feature running backs, give it to Caleb, who's already torching the Cyclones, or give it to LaShawn Williams, who is clearly a capable back too, or give it to Jazz Patterson, who
we haven't seen him out there.
He did not play.
TJ Washington had a rush late against Illinois State, but that was his first touch with the ones there. Mike, your thoughts on everything?
Disappointed. I think, my feeling right after the game is the same now. I feel like they blew the game. Like they were winning. They should have won. I'm sure the players feel that way too. Mm-hmm. You could see the emotion after the game too from all the players. I feel like they feel like they let this one get away. And it's a game that, and Mitch, we were talking when we were here at the station on Saturday, like the red zone stuff kind of makes you so mad, because if you just put your boot on their throat, go up 21 at half, I feel like the game's in hand.
A lot of feedback on Cade McNamara's day after he looked so great, especially in the second half against Illinois State, a rough ending to his Cy-Hawk tenure. No touchdowns and I believe 3 interceptions and about a 50% completion percentage in 2 career starts against the Cyclones, going 1-1. But one of the biggest talking points outside of that is getting 3 in 2 instances when you had a darn good shot at getting 6. 2 first and goals within the 5-yard line for Iowa there. One from inside, or one from the 3, another one going into the second quarter, right at the 1 after a swing pass out to LaShawn Williams, an 11-yard gainer to put Iowa at the Cyclone 1. And again, that was that Kamari Moulton rush for a loss of 3, the swing out to TJ Washington, a loss of 1 on the pass there, and then Cade throwing it out of the back of the end zone on 3rd down. 1 for 4 passing for -1 yards, 2 runs for -3 yards, and those 2 first and goal, 3 chances before the field goals there. Let's hear from Kirk and Cade first before we dissect more on just those red zone troubles. And you want 3, you didn't get, or you want 6, you got 3, and just how that can really play into the end of a game, certainly in a close one like this one.
Couple takeaways. In the first half, our defense played really well. Came up with 2 field goals. One was off really good field position. The other was after a really nice drive. And I had an opportunity, at least on one of those, maybe to get a touchdown and to come up with 2 field goals there. It's a couple missed opportunities and, came back and got us a little bit. There are a couple plays there that obviously we could have executed better that pushed us back, set us back. So, that's going to be part of the challenge as we go forward.
They're playing drop 8 coverage, so they have 8 guys in the red zone. There's 8 guys across the entire end zone, and when we were down that low, there's not a lot of room, and I mean, that's what they did, and it obviously worked for them. But, we just got to, again, we got to find ways to, we were trying to, we knew it was going to be a 3-man rush at times. And, we did our best to, extend some plays. The O-line gave me really good time. But, I think just overall, we had 4 tries. We can't just come up empty there. We got to find a way.
Yeah, we'll talk about the O-line here in a little bit, too, as we get into what's going right so far. But he's right. On those 4 dropbacks he had, especially the 3 incomplete passes there in the red zone, Cade had all day. I mean, he looked through every one of his targets. And, again, from our vantage point, kind of squatted down near the goal line and end zone. A lot of those were just kind of felt like throwaways. And it's, you can't help but think, especially when you start first and goal on the 1, of just Hayden Large set up that first and goal on the 3 as well. Lean on your fullbacks, use a sneak. They snuck with Cade, I think, once in the game. Boy, and again, it's a moot point. If this all works, we don't talk about this. Mixing it up, throwing it, keeping them off balance, but it didn't work, and so you just wonder, again, why not use your Marshawn, so to speak, and instead of throwing it up and giving a chance for Malcolm Butler to pick one off, or throwing it out of the back of the end zone and settling for 3, because again, as we'll get into the what went wrongs here, boy, when you're playing in the margins, and we talked about this so much the last 2 years, you got to get every point you can.
Yeah, and not that this necessarily what went wrong or is going wrong, but just a little surprised about the lack of involvement in against Iowa State with the tight ends. Luke Lachey just did. He maybe
4 targets, no catches.
No catches, is that right? Okay. Addison Ostrenga, I think, had a catch, or maybe
Catch in the red zone that set up.
He got it down before that Hayden Large first and goal.
That's just really shocking to me, because he was the guy who me and Mitch picked as our offensive MVP this year. For Luke Lachey not to get a single catch against what we'll just call your biggest rival, that's I don't know about concerning, but it's at least surprising.
I wonder if it was matchup based, because Iowa State does have a couple of pretty good safeties. Bo Freiler's really good, and I didn't get too deep in my rewatch to see if they were really bracketing Lachey, trying to make him not beat you, but it still is concerning when, on a lot of those Caleb runs, in the back of my head, I'm like, if he doesn't score, are we going to score a touchdown? So I was hoping they would break him. LaShawn, when you hit that swing pass, man, just 2 yards away, and if he punches that in, I'm not blaming him, because, he was tackled. It's a pretty good tackle, but, it's just those kind of plays where you need to put 7 on the board, you need to put the game away, and they weren't able to do that. And I almost think, too, a quarterback could have won that game for Iowa. Cade didn't do it. So I think Iowa's going through some growing pains on their offense. We knew it was going to happen. You just hope it didn't cost you a game, and week 2 it did.
It's just a reminder of just how much every yard matters, whether it's on the leash on the getting down at the 1, Jay Higgins' interception, where maybe if he gets one more block, that turns into a pick 6. They were deep back in that. We'll talk about field position here in a little bit as well. But speaking of that defense, and you heard the emotion and Sebastian Castro talking about feeling like he had let his teammates down. We've heard so much about how this defense wants to limit explosive plays. Gave up just the one, kind of when the game was already in hand against Illinois State, the deep pass. Xavier Lloyd for the Redbirds pulled one down against John Nestor. 4 explosive plays allowed for this Iowa defense. Those are passes of at least 20 to 25 yards. They were all passes they gave up all in the second half. Certainly the big touchdown there, the 75-yarder, the 30-yarder that helped set up the Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Week winning kick. What a story out of Dubuque Senior. But Kirk and Jay Higgins speaking about just uncharacteristic slips for the Iowa defense in the second half against Iowa State.
Basically, those first 2 possessions, the first 2 touchdown drives, I think, one was a big play, a single big play. The second one, I believe, and the other one was two plays that really hurt us. We let the wingback tight end out. He made a big conversion, and then we let 18 run down the seam too. So those were 2. That's the part that's just like not scoring when you got the ball inside the 5, scoring a touchdown. Conversely, on defense, we really try to defend against big plays, and that's good evidence of why. You want to make the other team work, and that to me is a bigger story there. Just the inability to defend those on those 2 possessions. The rest of the game we were doing pretty well, but it's it's a 60-minute game, and it's just part of the learning curve for us.
So I gotta get a better jam on number 3 receiver. Xavier, his job versus my job in that coverage is a lot harder than mine. We work on it every day. Coach Walls teaches us to jam receivers. My job is to take some speed off that receiver running right at X. He's got him the whole field. So X is counting on me to slow that guy down, reroute him, slow the timing off, and I didn't do that on that play. Everybody's going to look at X and blame him, but it was on me. So, I'll definitely make sure I'm, more aware next week. Just trying to eliminate those mental error plays where you don't think the details matter, because obviously that play, just got to slow that guy down, and that's a detailed play that an Iowa linebacker should make every time.
A lot of talk about that soundbite from Jay Higgins and taking responsibility for the Jalen Knoll 75-yard touchdown there, and talking about his responsibility and Xavier Wampa relying on him to do something in the front seven there to slow things up. That first touchdown, Jaden Higgins, TJ Hall can't play that any better than he did. It's just a heck of a play there. And so I feel like maybe that one was a little easier to swallow, so to speak, of just, hey.
Just a great play by Higgins, and the size probably picks that off.
Yeah, you're just not, we saw, I guess, against Nebraska last year, we saw was that the big gain, or was that 2 years ago now? They're starting to kind of
they
together.
Nebraska did have a big long touchdown against Iowa last year.
Yeah, something like that. You
you
aren't used to seeing those happen that often, but again, in these close games where you're trying to make plays at the very end, it's those big ones that really stand out, and those are haymakers in these slugfests, so to speak.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed too on my rewatch, and I don't know if this means anything, but I don't think Xavier played after that play. Another snap. Cohen and Seb did. So, was he benched, or was it just? I don't know what happened there. I guess the game notes are just out. I'm going to make sure the depth chart still says he.
Caleb Johnson is now your unquestioned number one running back.
No kidding.
In case there was any question there, but Xavier is still listed as your starting strong safety.
Okay. That's what some people were saying after the game. That as I've mentioned a number of times, and we talk about how hard it is for us to kind of keep track of who's on the field and who's not when we're down there shooting highlights. But that's what some people were saying was that Xavier did not play again after that play, which I forget when that happened. Was that
third quarter?
Yeah, that was still the third. So he
just
played the entire fourth.
That was after
rarely see that happen from Iowa defenses.
Iowa answered that long ISU drive, the Caleb touchdown, and then that was the first one. Boy, Iowa State had a couple big swings there that really.
Speaking of that Iowa touchdown beforehand, this was getting a lot of play on social media too. The 2-point conversion call. I didn't have much of a problem with it. I think, Iowa missed a 2-point conversion last week. I'm wondering if they're trying to figure out the right plays for a 2-point conversion that they'll need later in the season. But if you do get it, you're up 21, and they need a touchdown on the last drive.
Yeah. People have a problem with 2-point conversions when they don't work.
Well, there is a thought process too that it was too early. It was the middle of the third quarter, and there's a theory behind the analytics, like you don't chase points unless you have to.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, that makes sense. I think in this instance, I would have been fine either way.
I didn't have an opinion on it.
It confused me a little bit in the moment. I was like, oh, this seems a little early. But I know that every team has the chart for, when is a good and a bad time to go for two. And so if they're following that chart, it told them it was a good time. But I don't know. Even at the time, I thought, this would have at least given you, that would have been a 13-point lead as opposed to a 12-point lead. That's a good little difference in the end of the game. So I don't know, but it's a very hindsight perspective type of thing. But if nothing else, it was just one more, quote unquote red zone try that came up short, another incompletion.
Yeah, it's a little bit chicken of the egg. I think we've talked about this a little bit off pod. I can't remember if we talked about it on here, but when you're trying to define a good play call, when someone says, oh, that's a great play call, well, is it a great play call because it worked? Or is it the right call for the scenario? How do you define what makes a good play call? And so much of it is just the context of the situation, whether or not it works. One of my favorite plays in recent Iowa history is the Nate Stanley to TJ Hawkinson when the Ohio State defender's hanging off his leg. You could argue that was a really bad play call because that defender came completely untouched, but it turns into an incredible play. Is it a great play call? No, it was an awesome play.
Yeah.
You could argue, it's, the 2-point conversion, again, it only becomes a deal when you're looking at 19 instead of 20 or 21. Right?
So there's bad play calls and there's good plays made by players.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that during the game and the flow of the game and the context of the game, The one thing I would question down in the red zone, and you've already brought it up, like, why is Kamari getting that handoff? Why is LaShawn getting the handoff? KJ had the hot hand. He was, hitting the hole hard. Like, I would have liked to see that more. Does he need a breather? I don't know, but I think he probably would have said he could still play, or do another few downs. It just, the only red zone touchdown we scored is when he gave the ball to Caleb Johnson, and he found a hole. And I like Kamari Moulton. He's a good young back, but I think KJ is just on another level than all the running backs right now. So that's the one big question that I would have liked to see, on Saturday.
And I feel like nobody's going to second guess you if you give the ball to KJ there. Like, oh, well, we should have given the ball to Kamari. Like, if KJ's got the hot hand, like, you got to keep feeding him in that scenario.
The other thing in the fourth quarter, too, when Cade was not doing too hot, it just seemed like Iowa State, once they saw a run, they were really eager to hit the line.
Last year and 2 years ago, just like, yep, they're going to run. And that's, it's the Iowa style. We'll talk about it here in the next bullet point. But.
So why not little swing pass or shorter routes on the tree when you know a lot of guys are going to come up? On that last drive before the field goal, I was also thinking, and it's a tough spot, 3rd and 9, I was like, get the first down and you win. And they made him use the timeouts and ended up paying for Iowa. I like to see an aggressive play call. Throw the pass. If you don't see anything, take a sack. The clock still runs. You get a punt. Then you're questioning the punt distance when Reese hasn't hit many long punts. But I would have liked to see him go for the first down instead of just hand it off into you knew 9 guys from Iowa State were going to come up and stop that run on 3rd and 9.
Boy, I know even Blake Hornstein posted on X after they got that first down. Initially, he posted, I was going to keep the Cyhawk trophy, and then he, about 2 minutes later, took it down. But that sure, when they got that first down, looked for all the world like they had it in the bag.
They would have if there was no 2-minute timeout, I think. I mean, they would have got the ball back with like 12 seconds, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
Darn these rule changes.
We're boycotting the 2 minutes.
Yeah, now we are. It was shades of the Nebraska game that you and I were at last year, Mike, where it was like the end of the game, and for Iowa to win that game, it's like the exact right sequence of events had to happen. Like 3 or 4 different things had to happen for them to win that game, and that was what happened for Iowa State, where it's like 5 things had to go exactly right for them, and those 5 things all exactly went their way. When
games are like that, too, I mean, it seems pretty simple, and I don't like to bury on Cade, but it comes down to QB play and who had the better quarterback on Saturday. Oh, yeah. Iowa State did.
Big time. Second half, at least. I mean, not that Cade was setting the world on fire in the first half, but Rocco didn't. I mean, that was the storyline at halftime, was like Rocco looks shook out there, like he could not figure it out in the first half.
They had basically the same stats in the first half, other than Rocco's interception, which was a really good play by Jay, sitting in that zone, and Rocco didn't see him. The second half, though, it's just night and day. I don't know if they figured out the Iowa defense. I mean, it was a couple big plays. But Rocco just a little more accurate, or a lot more accurate, I should say.
And Rocco had those 2 completions on the final drive, and I think Iowa fans, if it wasn't at the forefront of their mind, maybe in the back of their heads, were thinking at some point this year, and I'm sure everybody in the locker room knew it too, there will be a point where we realize Torrey Taylor's not here anymore. Reese Dakin is, for being 2 games into his punting career, has looked good. He averaged more than 40 yards a punt on Saturday with 9 kicks, but it's these last 2 that helped ISU field position that maybe swung things a little more the momentum their way in those final drives. His last 2 punts were 36 yards and 37 yards. ISU had a fair catch on those at the 20 and 22 respectively, particularly that last one, because we saw him have a Torrey-esque one where it gets down at the 1, you run a few more seconds off the clock. It wasn't a situation where they were trying to melt clock. I believe that was in the second quarter, maybe first or second quarter. I think it was first. This 37-yarder one where Noel fair catches at the 22 with 40 seconds left. If that 37-yard punt is a 47-yard punt and he doesn't bother even trying to field it, and it runs for a little while longer, gets down at the 7 or the 6, something like that, and Iowa State's got to go 50, 55 yards instead of 40 yards to get in the field goal range. Boy, that feels like a little bit of difference that could go a long way. And, Torrey, you can make the argument, along with a great LeSean Williams run, won the Wisconsin game with those booming punts and pinning guys back. And this was the first instance, and it's not the variable, but it's a variable with a lot of other stuff we've talked about of just, boy, when you're playing within the margins and you're trying to put them in the worst position to drive to get a chance to win this thing with a long kick. every little one of those yards counts. To your point of, whether or not you go for it on 3rd and 9, and you pass it, or if it's incomplete, you stop the clock, or you take the sack and you lose a little more yardage. The clock is the ultimate weapon there, and pinning them back with as little time as possible. And there was just an instance of the first time we've been like, boy, Torrey's boot would have been nice. We saw him; he had one for 60 again in his NFL regular season debut yesterday. He looked great. Just another one of those little factors that when you're playing a close game like this and one element struggling, if your offense is struggling, you're really leaning into defensive special teams. That special teams was, like I said, maybe just 10, 12 yards. That's all away from making it really difficult on Becton Company, even though they had all the momentum in the world. Just giving that Iowa defense and getting them tucked back deeper into that north end zone. That north end zone, especially on those opening drives when they went a full TV timeout like right away. Iowa State was tucked back in, sunk into that noise. You do that one more time in the fourth quarter and make Becton Company try to drive out of it. Just that little bit of yardage could have made a big, big difference. Not the only variable, but certainly one that you just think there and go, boy, it's a different number 9 back there, and this one's going to be really good, and it's shown his stuff, but just one of those little elements.
That first quarter when they were backed up to the 1 yard line, boy, that was a loud atmosphere. That's one of the top loudest I've experienced Kinnick Stadium at this point. That was such a loud. It wasn't quite to the level of Cooper DeJean punt return touchdown last year, but it was pretty raucous in there.
I remember being back there. Noah Shannon in 2022 had a big sack after the Padilla to Lachey touchdown to make it a 1-score game against Nebraska there, and he had a big tackle for loss. I think like first play that Nebraska ran after that, and that and that first drive for ISU are about as loud as I've heard that north end zone for a non-Cooper DeJean event. It gets loud back there. That construction, that little over-arc is that's a game changer. It can be.
I think that Dakin had, I believe, 2 punts inside the 10-yard line. His first punt was the 1 to the 1, and then his second punt, I think, was also inside the 10. I forget where it landed. But at the end of the day, honestly, his growth, and if you want to call it a struggle, it's pretty low on my list of concerns for this team. It'd be nice to have a Ray Guy Award winner in there who's going to pin you down at the 4-yard line, but he hasn't shanked a punt yet. As long as you back him up to the 20, it's like 90% of the punters in America. I feel like that's about all that you want to get out of him. So he's going to get there. His growth is going to come. He's had some good ones. He's had some mediocre ones, but I don't know. I don't think that anybody on the team is looking too much at
not
Reese.
at all. No, this is not.
It's just it was one of those factors.
Situational. It's there.
Yeah.
14 punts so far in his career. 6 of them have been inside the 20s, averaging 40 yards punt.
Yeah.
Kid wasn't playing football about a year ago or however long it's been. Like he's brand new to the sport, and he's been everything you could ask for. Just the situation.
That's interesting though, Mitch, because I was thinking yesterday, and I put a poll on our Twitter account, the Eye on the Hawks Twitter account. I was like, what do you think the biggest reason why Iowa lost? And I think there's not one that's like one singular reason. So I put 3 up, and 60 votes or so. Red zone offense is number 1, about half the votes. QB play was 2, and explosive plays allowed is 3. I think that has a lot to do with this team in the past 3 years, where you lean on your defense every game. You're going to get more leeway for your defense. At some point, the offense has to win a game, and it was sitting there to be won, and it didn't happen. And we knew these lulls were going to happen throughout the season. It's only game 2 of this lesser offense. I think it's going to grow, but it doesn't sit well today, just because there's a loss on the column,
Yeah, it feels a little different than the Reds or the goal line stand we saw at Wrigley last year with Northwestern, where they just ran right into them and Iowa stopped them 4 times in a row. This felt a little more of lack of execution, great deep red zone defense by the Cyclones, but just especially that 1st and goal on the 1, 3 feet, your QB sneak you. It feels like sometimes like.
Was that the one that Kamari got blown up?
That first play, yeah. And you lose 3 yards, and maybe that shakes you up.
I rewatched that 3 times, and Dominic Orange, who's their starting.
Yeah.
Johnny Pascuzzi was the one blocking him. So, I'm kind of sitting there, and I'm like, your 4th or 3rd string tight end, probably 4th, because Orworth plays more than him, I think. Mm-hmm. Why is he soloed on a D end? I don't know the intricacies of O-line, so I'm not going to question it, but it's like, that doesn't make much sense. And obviously, he shoved him off and hit him 2 yards in the backfield. It's like, I would like to see, maybe 2 tight ends on the field, spread it out, get those get a little more space in between the tackles.
Some of those red zone plays, they had 4 tight ends out there, didn't they?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Pascuzzi and Hayden Large was in there. Don't know if you count him a fullback or tight end. He's both.
He's a little bit of everything, yeah. He's kind of your H-back. Well, so Konrardy, who's your Big 12 Player of the Week, special teams, goes down, hits from 54. Again, what kid's a great story. I don't care.
Man.
Black and gold, cardinal and gold.
Yeah.
Unbelievable story out of Dubuque senior. Max White, listen, if Iowa pulls this off, Max White's a hero, more than people already admire him for what he does on that team. A great kickoff return. And I was sitting next to Mike when this came up, and someone had put out on social, and I'm sure there were multiple people that said, Iowa's opting for the Hail Mary instead of the field goal. And my first thought was, yeah, duh. Why wouldn't they? And the more I thought about it, 66 yards, that's a poke. Listen, that's a record.
That will tie the NFL record, 66 yards.
But we've talked, and we'll talk more about Drew Stevens. He has been booming these 37, 40-yard field goals. The wind might have been a little bit of a factor. Do you wonder if there was an opportunity to trot out Drew Stevens and try from 66? There's a little scoffed, and that was my initial reaction. But the more
I remember you
think
saying
about
that. You were like,
this dude's got it.
66 yards.
But the more I think about it, I'm like, man, we've been marveling about how Drew's kicks have, they've been good from 40, and we're like, boy, that'd be good from 60. He had leg in there, and he's hit in crunch time at Wrigley, and he's didn't get opportunities down the stretch to kick, didn't get the shot at Nebraska, and this is, again, moot point because it's over and done with. It's 48 hours old, but does part of you wonder, now that we know obviously what happened, Drew Stevens from 66, do you give him a shot instead of the Hail Mary? There's low probabilities of success on either one of these options. But would you have rather left a kick short or a Hail Mary short?
Yeah, would the ball have gone farther than Cade's pass, which got to what, the 5-yard line, something like that?
Between the 5 and the 10, I think.
Yeah, didn't even reach the end zone. Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I don't know. LeVar Woods would be the best guy to ask. What Drew's range is like. I don't know if even Drew himself would say he's got 66-yard range. I know with one of those early field goals, the wind was at his back. I didn't look at kind of which way the flags were waving there at the end, but that would have been interesting. I really can't say which I would have preferred as if I were an Iowa fan, like what I would have rather seen happen out there. If I'd just say, hey, let Cade throw it up and see if a receiver can come down with it, see if Reese Vanderzee can moss another couple guys or something in the end zone. But it's an interesting talking point. I'm a little surprised in hindsight that nobody did ask that after the game to Kirk, just like, did you think about sending Drew out there?
I think if it was 5 yards, if it was 61, I think you have a question.
There's a big difference, yeah.
Yeah, and if he gets 5 more yards on the return, we probably don't have a second to do it.
Exactly.
I would say Hail Mary, but I'd almost say if you know Cade's arm can't get it down, and maybe Brendan's can't either, why don't you put Sullivan in there for the Hail Mary? Like, I'm not sure if they'd had to have practiced Hail Marys, right? And it looked like he had a clean throw, step into the throw, and he was short. I don't know. I think, like you said, it's like less than 1% chance anyway if you make it. So if Sullivan has a stronger arm, which I'm not sure if he does,
don't know.
I think they're probably pretty comparable, so maybe that's why it didn't happen. But I would have rather seen that. But 66, long field goal. 61, I would have said, heck yes. Trot him out there, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Why not?
Kane was, 57, 58 against Pitt in 2015?
57, yeah, I think.
57, and he crushed that one.
Yeah.
Tyler Boyd, I still remember watching him go over the goalpost and just be like, because he was back to return if it was short. That thing wasn't short.
I think those long field goals are more like, are they going to block it more so than like, can you get it there,
Sure. Yeah.
At least if your kicker has that leg strength.
Yep. So we'll get to Drew again in a little bit. Well, let's shift to what's going right so far through 2 games. We've already talked about him. Caleb Johnson, we were a year early in picking him in offensive MVP. Mike's right on time. 4th in the NCAA rushing, 2nd in the Big Ten with 306 yards. He's 5th in the NCAA with 4 rushing touchdowns. Out of his 36 carries, he has carries of 12, 18, let me get them all right, 12, 18, most of his productions come off 7 carries. 12, 18, 26, 27, 37, 54, 64 yards.
And he's
done it in a game and a half.
And not even a career high on Saturday with 187 yards.
He's that's right. Did he go for 200 against Purdue?
200 exactly against Purdue in 2022.
Thoughts on Caleb and what he's done? He has just been He's been a blast.
Boy, I was kind of looking up. I was like, has anybody done this against Iowa State so far? I was able to pull up the records for rushing yards in a game, and I can see the Iowa State ones on there. So the single game record against Iowa State for a Hawkeye player, Dennis Mosley in 1979 ran for 229.
Who could forget?
I think we all remember that game well. Tony Stewart in 88 ran for 194. And then this is the third most in a game against Iowa State for a Hawkeye.
And again, just
87 yards.
Chunk play after chunk play after
Just
chunk
every
play.
time he touched the ball, every time he touched the ball, it was going somewhere. Maybe his most impressive play was on I forget if it was like a 3rd and 3 or something, and he gets met right at the line of scrimmage by Bo Freiler, and he just carries Bo Freiler with him past the first down marker. I mean, that guy was unbelievable on that day. I mean, I don't know if that's what we get out of Caleb every game, because guys are going to be focused more and more on him every single game, but he was remarkable on Saturday.
Yeah, 25 carries. He also had 3 catches for 9 yards.
Yeah, why not?
Just hands down the best player on Iowa's offense on Saturday. And yeah, I think there's nothing else you can say other than he looks legit. He could lead contend for leading the Big Ten in rushing. Who knows if he'll get as many
Kyle
opportunities.
Konrardy is the only guy ahead of him right now from Rutgers, who Iowa shut down very well against the Scarlet Knights last year. But he has been, aside from the Boise State guy who just went for 306 scores in the opener.
And they played Oregon tight on Saturday.
Yeah, they watch out for Boise State. We talked about that. And you see it if you're watching on YouTube on the other side of this graphic. Because, in part of Caleb, the Iowa offensive line has helped pave the way for the number 27 overall rushing offense in the country. And they've only given up the 1 sack, and that was, I believe, a 4th quarter play by Cade. It looked like he was rolling out, trying to hit maybe that Jacob Gill route that they went for 6 on against Illinois State.
Yeah, he was open that play.
Yeah, and he was open and just got swallowed up there. But, hey, trying to protect the quarterback and pave the way for your running game. It's been pretty good to see out of the Iowa offense. Let's hear from Caleb Johnson and Jennings Dunker about the success so far on the ground.
I just feel first thing I could thank is my whole line, because without them, I wouldn't have the holes that I have to make the runs that I made. So I just thank them, and, that's really it.
He comes in every day and he works hard and he puts in the work in practice and he watches film and he knows where he's hitting the ball at. So I think that just really speaks to how hard he's been working and, preparing for games and stuff.
So now you've got that conundrum. You kind of talked about it a little bit of now Caleb gets the full focus if he wasn't already. How do you just keep going at it? Do you change? How do you handle having an offense that's coming off a struggle, but there's one bright shining star in there?
I mean, hopefully this means that. I have to imagine that LaShawn didn't play on Saturday very much, just because he's still recovering from his injury. We can talk to Kirk about that tomorrow when we get a chance to see him. But if anything, hopefully that opens things up more for some of the other running backs. Maybe that opens things up for LaShawn, or maybe for the tight ends to start to step into a little bit bigger role. Because, guys are going to start noticing this kid who is, what'd you say, what in the nation in rushing right now?
4th in the nation, 2nd in the Big Ten. And again, I crunched the numbers to be something like almost 240 of his 306 yards have come on those 7 carries I rattled off. So, it's not necessarily boom or bust, but the booms are big. The booms are real big. You see that one if you're watching on YouTube right now, that long one against Illinois State, and then he had another one, a little shorter one, but even, to go for 27 and 37, you rip off a 54-yarder. The offensive line is open in holes, and he has taken every bit of advantage of it. It's been fun to see.
I feel like after both the spring game and the kids' day practice, both Mike and I kind of talked about how much he looks like an NFL running back, just in body stature and in his running style, and he sure looks like it right now on the field.
He's big. I'm going to change this up a little bit, Mike, and swap these next 2 what's going right pieces. We'll stay on the offensive side as we try to look for the light after some second-half struggles there by the Iowa offense. Jacob Gill, whose career high in receptions for a season at Northwestern was 8, and I think yardage was 94, has 7 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown through 2 games as a Hawkeye. He's wide receiver 1 right now. Reese popped off against Illinois State. I know the hopes for Caleb Brown are that he comes back, and he had the 1 target that was if it's a good throw to him, that's one that could be a touchdown. But Jacob Gill and his experience, the most experienced wide receiver in that room really outside of Caden Weegan, he's your number one, and he's made a lot of really tough catches in traffic, over the middle. He has been a wonderful addition, it seems, through 8 quarters of his Hawkeye career.
Yeah, and not that I'm going to be pushing for a quarterback change anytime soon, but you wonder about what kind of chemistry would be out there if they ever decide to swap to Brendan Sullivan. You know, his roommate, both at Northwestern and at Iowa, what kind of chemistry those two would have on the field together. But yeah, just such a surprise, I think. I mean, when he came and transferred to Iowa, it's like, all right, sure, add a little bit of wide receiver depth, but I don't think anybody expected him to be wide receiver 1 through 2 games. He's been a great star for Iowa.
Surprised you guys at all that Caleb only got the 1 target or 2 targets? I mean, he was hands down the best wide receiver last year towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't know if there were any questions about that post game.
I don't believe so.
He's listed as number 2 receiver, I believe, behind Caden. I don't know. I'm guessing we'll see more of him against Troy. Maybe we won't, but I would assume.
Yeah.
You see more.
Ease him into the playbook or into the game action, and but Jacob Gill has been an amazing. Like I think we were kind of unsure going into the season whether he would. I guess I assumed we'd get meaningful playing time, but no one thought it'd be him and Reese Vanderzee as your top 2 target getters. You know, it seemed, Caleb with the suspension, we knew he was going to play last week. We thought him and Seth Anderson would be the guys, and
Seth's been out the last 2 games, so we'll see what could happen for him for Troy. It sounded like maybe he was still not quite there, and then you got to work back in. But Jacob Gill, has been a really nice story, and I believe I haven't asked him because we haven't had the opportunity to yet, but I'm pretty sure that's his first home touch. That one against Illinois State was his first home field touchdown since high school. His 2 scores in his Wildcat career were at Duke and at Penn State, so I'm sure hearing 70,000 strong cheer for you was something he hadn't experienced maybe ever, and certainly not on a home field there for quite a while. So it's been fun to see Jacob Gill certainly find himself at home in Iowa City. Defense, we'll shift back to there. What's going right so far? Well, if you flush the second half against Iowa State, 4 turnovers already forced after 15 all of 2023. You got 2 picks and 2 fumble recoveries so far. 5 sacks as well. The defense has looked about what you'd expect out of a group that came back with so much seniority, all the reps. You've had Jamari Harris get his interception, Jay Higgins' first career pick inside Kinnick, second career pick.
He picked off
overall.
Purdue last year.
Was that at home?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking of the fumble recovery. I always think the fumble recovery at Wisconsin was an interception. You're right there. So 2 picks now inside Kinnick, 1 against, I believe, I can't remember. Never mind.
Hudson Card?
No, it was Hudson Card. He when I asked him about it, he made some mention about, I think maybe he had played somebody. It was something from high school. Forget about me. My mind's all over the place. Thoughts on the defense so far outside of the rough second half?
Boy, started your season with 6 quarters of shutout football. I was really going to hammer hard that little stat I looked up about the last time they shut out Iowa State being in 1919. I was like,
look good at halftime.
2 quarters, baby. Let's finish it. They did not look like an Iowa defense in the second half. As much as there were some little things that went wrong here and there, it was just not quite what we expect out of them. But overall, you have to be pleased with getting the turnovers. I know that there's a stat out there. I'd have to look it up again because Castro had the pick 6 against Iowa State last year, and that was like something like the 16th straight season that they've had a pick 6. And so we're still waiting on that to happen this year. But I think that's a pretty a lot of people are impressed by that number. There's not a lot of teams out here that have that many straight seasons with a pick 6 on their resume. But things look good. Defensive line looks great. Max Llewellyn looking good out there. Defensive line has really, even though at the start of the season we talked about that being maybe a thin spot for Iowa, like you got a good starting group, but D tackles maybe don't have a lot of depth there, but gosh, they look really good so far.
Yeah, Y.A. Black had a couple really nice tackles against Iowa State. Jeremiah Pittman, I know, is in there a little bit as well. If you're watching the video from on the YouTube channel, you just saw Aaron Graves, who has 3 of the 5 sacks so far for Iowa this year. But we've seen the depth show off a little bit, and I thought out of these 2 games, I mean, that was, even though in a loss, and I know he was hard on himself about the long play to Knoll, that was a vintage as much as it can be for a guy who's started now like 16 career games. That was vintage Jay Higgins. He was everywhere, especially in that first half, with hard hits, leading the way, got the interception.
Kind of tough call on the pass interference, or roughing the passer call, I thought. His hands did hit the helmet, so I'm not going to complain about it too much.
By
It's just,
the book, yeah.
he was trying to block the pass, Unfortunate for him. Outside of those two big plays, though, like, they did what Iowa defenses needed to do outside. Those are pretty big plays in the outcome of the game. Kind of interesting that they looked like they were in a man-to-man with the two safeties over the top towards the end of the game. Usually I feel like they'd make you dink and dunk it, but they did switch it up and went man, and Seb got beat, which was a great route, I should say, by Noel. So when you have two receivers that are that good, it's tough to contain them the whole game. It really is, and they did it for most of the game. It just, those 2 plays, 2, 3, 4 plays that bit them.
Yeah, hard to say by the end of the year, boy, this is going to be, as you talk about those 2 great receivers, this might be the best wide receiver tandem that they face just about all season. 2 guys that are probably going to be playing in the NFL.
Outside of Ohio State, yeah, probably.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's, again, Rocco and the...
Good test for Ohio State, though.
Yeah, certainly settled in and had success. I guess you hang your hat if you're Iowa. Sama didn't really have a whole lot of anything. He was bottled up pretty well. And again, your rush defense has been doing pretty darn well. One more thing that's going right so far, and we've already mentioned Drew Stevens, 4 for 4 on field goals, 7 for 7 on extra points. For a kid who more or less got benched in Lincoln, and Marshall Meter trotted out to win the Heroes Trophy last Black Friday, Drew Stevens, you couldn't ask for much more out of him so far. Whether or not he gets a shot at the end of the Iowa State game, he has been the bounce back you'd want out of your guy who's won games before and has shown he's more than capable. He looks bigger. He talked about putting on size in the offseason. And again, that leg has looked strong, and he's been true 4 for 4 so far.
Yeah, got to instill a lot of confidence in Hawkeye fans, knowing that if the game comes down to a field goal like it did against, say, Northwestern last year, that Drew's got the capacity to do something like that. I'm really curious to see him when he gets a chance at a 50-plus yarder, see what he can do out there. But he's looked solid. That's all you can ask of him right now.
I'm muted because I took a drink earlier. The whole special teams, I think, has looked pretty solid so far. No, game-changing plays like a block punt. I think Hilson's going to block a punt before the year ends.
He had a roughing the punter.
Yeah. Didn't end up hurting us.
He's almost on top of the punter on half these guys. And I feel like Iowa State's snapper kept things really low. I don't know if that was what Iowa State's punter wanted, if just
They changed punters mid-game. They did the same thing as North Dakota.
Yeah.
North Dakota, they rotated, so they were kind of see. I think the first 2 punts, I don't know if you guys caught this, but the broadcast caught it, and Gary Danielson talked about it. The first 2 punts for Iowa State, the punter dropped it and double grabbed it, but he was able to get the punt off clean. Then they switched their punter. I don't know if that was planned or if they did it because it was hey, we're not going to fumble a snap and give Iowa a really good field position or a touchdown even. But, one of the bright spots too, I think, is Caden Weegan in the punt return game. Pretty solid. No, outside of that, he had one against Illinois State brought back for a block in the back, but he's catching all the punts. He's getting plus yardage. So I thought he's been really solid in the return game so far too.
Yeah, fun to see.
That was something that our colleague at 9, Scott Sable, pointed out to me right away. It's this was not true by the end of the game, but early on he was like, boy, Weegan does not call for a fair catch. That guy is not in the business of fair catching footballs. He did for a few of them, but gosh, that guy really loves to try to rip one off.
And what we saw, what was that, his second return against Illinois State? He's got reason to want to return. When he hits full speed, that kid is fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he is.
So we'll see if he gets more involved in the offense here against Troy. We'll talk to players and coaches tomorrow down in Iowa City as they try to flush and move forward. And one last non-con tune-up against Troy, and then you head to Minnesota, which we just learned in the last couple of hours. That'll be a 6:30 kick next Saturday up at Huntington Bank Stadium as the Gophers try to hold on to Floyd, and Iowa looks to get him out of the Twin Cities.
We have the full Eye on the Hawks crew up there in Minneapolis. We've got 3 confirmed credentials for all 3 of us. So live pod post-game. Going to be a late night up at TC. Wait, what's it called? What Bank Stadium now?
Huntington Bank
Stadium.
That stadium is
Bank.
almost 15 years old, which is wild.
Wow.
Maybe that's because I saw so many games in the Metrodome growing up. The fact that that's a quote-unquote old stadium now, that's pretty wild and a fun one. It's a great area, and Kinnick North always gets plenty of fans, but of course for it to be Kinnick North, you got to win up there, and there's a job to do, but it's
Awesome too to have it in September because I went for my 21st birthday about 15 years ago, and it was cold because it was the last game of the year.
I was up there in 22 when it was -1 wind chill at kick, and that's my dad's a lifelong Gopher fan. He's from Northeast Iowa and had family in the Twin Cities. I think that's the last Minnesota game in November he'll go to. That was a cold one, and to then lose in a cold way the way Minnesota did in that game 2 years ago, that'll keep anybody inside by the fire for the rest of those games. But again, we'll break everything down. Looking ahead to Troy coming up on Wednesday. The live stream hits at 1 o'clock. So again, if you haven't been watching these on the YouTube channel, please get to the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel and check all this out. And again, Owen and Mike are clipping stuff and adding more stories to the Eye on the Hawks playlist there throughout the week. So it's always great to have that content. And keep following us on Twitter as well at Eye on the Hawks.
Do you want to quickly go over our picks?
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to avoid that. This is gonna get ugly.
Yeah.
I offer? Did I go?
No,
over
you picked USC over Utah State.
Oh.
So the first game, Michigan,
Spencer Petras
Texas.
did not play, by the way. Spencer Petras did not play against USC.
We all missed on Maryland. Michigan State won that game straight up, and they were 9.
Sparty.
Kind of confusing them all season. You know, they almost lost to FAU, beat them in a close game, and then beat Maryland. So Texas rolled like I predicted.
Boy, I picked Michigan. Dang.
Yeah, that's
Thinking. Idiot.
Owen correctly picked Nebraska, and Mitch and I had Colorado, and they just stomped the
What were you
Buffs.
guys thinking? Man.
I thought it'd be close.
Colorado in very a different form reminds me a lot of a Baylor team that I covered when they played Michigan State in the Cotton Bowl, New Year's Day 2015. Baylor was up 20 with 12 minutes left and could not run the ball to save their lives. And Michigan State came up with an incredible comeback to win that game.
Weren't they down like 40? Did you say that already?
They were down 20.
20,
They were down
okay.
41-21 with 12 minutes left. And Bryce Petty was the quarterback, and this was kind of the tail end of Baylor's dominance offensively, but Colorado can't run the ball, and that's troublesome, problematic, and you wonder what's going to go down in Boulder the rest of the way. It's you're 1-1, but boy, that's a shot across the bow to walk into Lincoln and look the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska putting 2 straight FCS opponents on the schedule. That's a bold move. Colorado and then UNI. It's crazy. Anyway, been waiting, been sitting on that line for a while. But yeah, no Spencer Petras out there for Utah State. We saw Joe Labus out there for Central Michigan throwing 5 picks. Deacon Hill had an all right game for Utah Tech, but Iowa's other former quarterback.
They got blown up by, was it UNLV playing?
The running Rebs.
I guess I think it was like 30, or it was 72-14, but he had a 64-yarder to tie it up at 7 early. So
there you go.
Iowa quarterbacks finding other spots, and hopefully Spencer's okay. I know Bryson Barnes is more than capable of beating USC. He did it last year as the backup at Utah. So hopefully things continue to work out for those guys. But again, we'll be back here Wednesday at 1. You can tune in to Eye on the Hawks as well on Twitter tomorrow as we post stuff from Kinnick after talking with players and whatnot. We'll continue getting content out, and then we'll look ahead to the final non-conference game for the 2024 Hawkeyes ahead of that trip to Minneapolis. We'll be back here on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. Thanks for tuning in to another installment of Eye on the Hawks.